I remember that day as if it were yesterday. Thanksgiving had always been special to me, the smell of fresh bread, cinnamon, roasted turkey, the holiday table around which the whole family gathers. I had prepared everything in advance, bought the freshest ingredients, marinated the turkey, baked an apple pie, picked out a beautiful tablecloth, and even prepared a small gift for my son and his family. It was all done with love, with a sense of celebration and family warmth. I had long dreamed of spending this day together, talking quietly, reminiscing about old times, feeling the comfort of home. Memories swirled in my head, how my wife and I had raised the children together, how we had celebrated holidays, how we had learned to cherish one another. When I pulled up to my son's house, I had no idea this visit would become a true test of character. I lifted the bag of groceries, knocked gently on the door, and heard an almost mocking voice, "Oh, you're here. I wasn't expecting you." I froze on the doorstep, stunned. My heart clenched with hurt, as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. I looked at my son and couldn't believe my ears. "Is this how you greet your own father, who has supported you all these years, invested his time and energy, tried to help?" He stood in the doorway, arms crossed arrogantly, radiating clear irritation and discomfort. There was no joy in his eyes, no faint smile, not even a hint of pleasure at seeing me. On the contrary, his voice held barely concealed contempt. And that's when something twisted inside me, a mix of shock, hurt, and mild confusion. I felt the injustice of the whole situation like a cold wind cutting straight to the bone. How can this be, after all these years, flashed through my mind. I tried to remain calm, though my heart was pounding and my hands trembled with tension. I searched his eyes, trying to find a trace of gratitude, but instead saw only faint mockery. I took a step forward with a smile, trying to defuse the situation, and said, "I brought you some groceries and a gift. I thought we could celebrate together." My son just waved a hand dismissively, as if my gesture meant nothing to him. "Yeah, thanks, but like I said, I wasn't expecting you," he repeated with the same performative coldness. I felt anger growing inside me, quiet, but relentless. It seemed that everything I had done for him, all those years of support, help, and care, meant nothing to him. His words cut deeper than any knife because they struck right at the heart, at my role as a father, at my significance in the family. A sense of humiliation washed over me. I set the bags down on the doorstep slowly, as if every movement required effort. The desire to answer my son's arrogance was held in check, but an inner voice whispered, "You deserve respect. They need to understand this behavior is unacceptable." My daughter-in-law, noticing the tension, tried to smile and intervene, "Dad, don't worry, let's just make dinner." But her words only heightened the feeling of injustice. Instead of supporting me, she almost seemed to play along with my son, oblivious to how every one of my gestures was met with disdain. I looked at the table, at the food I had so carefully prepared, and felt a strange mix of emotions, hurt and astonishment all at once. How could anyone treat a family member this way, one who had come with good intentions, with gifts, with care? I held myself back, trying not to give in to an immediate reaction. Instead of raising my voice, I just stood there, observing their behavior. I watched as my son continued to bustle around the kitchen, ignoring my presence, and I felt, this wasn't just irritation, it was arrogance, a demonstration of power and independence. And in that moment, I understood that this conflict could not be resolved peacefully. I understood that there was an injustice here, and it demanded a response. My hurt was like a fire slowly kindling, warming and warning at the same time. I took a deep breath, hid my emotions behind a calm mask, but inside I was already forming a plan, how to show my son that his arrogance and indifference would not go unpunished. This visit, which should have been a celebration, had become the beginning of a moral confrontation I knew I had to win. The moment I stepped over the threshold of my son's house, it became clear, the celebration I had imagined as a warm family dinner had turned into an arena of silent confrontation. My son hadn't just said he wasn't expecting me, his words, his tone, his gaze all radiated indifference, almost mockery. "You're here. I wasn't expecting you," he said with a slight sneer, as if testing how much a few simple words could wound me. And in that moment, a deep sense of injustice stirred within me. I remembered all the years I had worked to provide for him and the home he now considered his own, how much money I had poured into repairs, how many times I had helped him financially and emotionally. And now, it seemed, none of it mattered. I tried to pull myself together and not show the full spectrum of my emotions. On the table lay the turkey, the apple pies, the neatly arranged napkins, all of it was meant to be a symbol of family warmth. But my son's gaze slid right past me, as if I were invisible. He busied himself ostentatiously with preparing side dishes, exchanging jokes with his wife, who occasionally glanced at me with faint concern, but more often with subtle condescension. Inside, I felt the hurt growing, but outwardly I remained calm. "All right, no problem, I'll help," I said, trying to ease the tension. I offered to chop vegetables for the salad, and my son just waved a hand. "Yeah, do whatever you want." His voice held a barely perceptible arrogant note, as if he wanted to emphasize, "I don't need you." It was hard to hold back. Thoughts raced through my head. Is this how children behave toward their parents? Can years of care and support be erased with a single word? I felt a quiet, steady anger rising within me, not the kind that tears you apart in the first seconds, but the kind that patiently waits for its moment. The situation was worsened by small but significant details. My daughter-in-law kept making gentle jabs at me, as if testing boundaries. My son's friends whispered to each other, nodding at my actions or hesitations. I felt their eyes on me, heard their murmurs. "He came with gifts, and he's still here, how pathetic." Each such action intensified the feeling of humiliation, making the evening increasingly nervous and tense. It felt as if the entire celebration had become a play where I was the extra, and my son and his circle were the actors, demonstrating their superiority. Inside, I fought the urge to snap, to shout, or to leave. But at the same time, I understood, I couldn't let them see they had hurt me. I quietly continued helping with the cooking, carved the turkey, arranged the dishes on the table, pretended everything was fine, but my mind was already crafting a response. Every arrogant gesture, every dismissive smile, it all lodged in my memory, forming a plan. I understood, this conflict couldn't be resolved peacefully, but there was a way to show that indifference and disregard have consequences. Another factor heightened the tension. My son began boasting about how well he managed his finances, how he was building his life on his own, mentioning his mortgage and expenses. His words sounded like a challenge. "See, Dad, I'm managing without your help." I felt each word like a knife twisting inside me. And that's when something I had long kept under control awoke within me, a cunning, a calculative desire to show my son that independence without respect for one's parents is an illusion. The evening unfolded in this tension. I quietly carried out my tasks, smiled when necessary, but every glance, every gesture from my son and his circle only pushed me closer to an inner resolution. I already knew the moral victory would be mine, and that the moment to claim it was not far off. Every moment of that dinner was a trial for me, from my son publicly flaunting his superiority to my daughter-in-law softly yet persistently supporting him. I felt the inner anger growing, but also a clarity. This couldn't be fixed peacefully. Right now, they think they've won, but soon everything will change, I thought, feeling the plan for future retribution taking shape in my mind. My son sat in his armchair, arms spread across the armrests, and with a smug smile told his friends about his new purchase. "You won't believe it, Dad, I finally bought a new car. A sedan, all-wheel drive, a gorgeous color. Can you imagine?" His voice was thick with pride, and the look he gave me seemed to say, "See, I'm managing just fine without your help." I froze in place, my heart pounding. Everything inside me, years of care, support, the monthly mortgage transfers, the repairs, the furniture, seemed to vanish into emptiness. I understood, he had grown up receiving everything handed to him, and now he took my help for granted. His arrogance and bragging about the new car acted on me like a red flag to a bull. Inside, resentment, anger, and a quiet but steadfast sense of justice boiled. How can he speak like this to his own father, who has always supported him? I pretended to smile and nod, but in my mind, I was already forming a plan. An inner voice whispered, "He's forgotten who paid his mortgage all these years, who gave him the chance to live comfortably and spend money on such frivolities. It's time to show him the price of his indifference." At that moment, I noticed the mortgage documents on the table, contracts, payment printouts, account details. In his arrogance, my son had left them out in the open, completely unaware that I might use them. And then it struck me, I could cancel all the payments. This wouldn't just be a blow to his wallet, it would be a symbolic, moral victory. I said quietly, "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom," and slowly stepped away from the table. My heart was racing, my hands trembling slightly, but cold calculation and a long-awaited opportunity took over. In the hallway, I took out my phone, logged into my online banking, and carefully double-checked the details. Every move was deliberate: select all the payments, confirm the amounts were correct, and press the cancel button. Time seemed to freeze the moment I hit confirm. All the transfers that had been covering my son's mortgage were now stopped. In that moment, I felt a strange but profound satisfaction. This wasn't an act of malice, but a lesson. I was aware of the risk: perhaps our relationship would change forever, perhaps my son would never forgive me. But softness and patience had already failed. Sometimes, to be heard, you have to act decisively. Returning to the table, I kept my face calm, as if nothing had happened. My son continued boasting about his car, a radiant smile on his face, but now his success rested on shaky ground. I watched his hands, the movement of his shoulders, every detail, and inside me surged a feeling of moral triumph. I had done what I had to, quietly and legally, but the consequences would soon reveal themselves. A mix of emotions churned within me: anger, satisfaction, slight anxiety, and pride in myself. I knew that now, for the first time, he would feel that the world doesn't revolve around his desires, that gratitude and respect are not empty words. I saw a faint unease in my daughter-in-law's eyes, and my son's friends began exchanging glances, as if sensing that something had changed but not yet understanding what. I smiled quietly to myself: he doesn't know it yet, but the lesson has been delivered. Every moment of the dinner was now filled with hidden, tense dynamics. I ate calmly, but my eyes observed my son's every move. I knew that his pride, his confidence, were about to collide with reality, and it wouldn't just be a financial blow, but a moral shock. And so, sitting at the table, watching his joy over the new car, I felt complete satisfaction. Inside, I understood: the act was done, the lesson delivered, and balance had been restored, if only on a small, symbolic scale. I had done what I had to, and now the consequences would set everything right. Throughout the day, I heard his panicked calls, short, filled with anger and confusion. He couldn't understand what had happened. I observed discreetly, indulging in a private sense of satisfaction: each failed payment was a small, sweet victory for justice. On the third day after the dinner, my daughter-in-law, concerned by his reaction, decided to intervene. She came to my house, trying to smooth things over, her words tumbling out quickly, almost stumbling over themselves: "Please, forgive him, he didn't expect this. Can we restart the payments?" I looked at her carefully, sensing the full weight of her attempts to manipulate me. But in that moment, I understood with firm clarity: no one would use me as a wallet anymore. I calmly replied, "No. He needs to understand the cost of his words and his indifference." In desperation, my son decided to take matters into his own hands and called me directly. His voice was full of rage, shouting, and threats: "Have you lost your mind? Give the money back, you have to. This is my mortgage." I simply listened, feeling the tension in him mounting, and said calmly, "I did what I thought was fair. No more transfers." He screamed into the phone, but my nerves were like steel. I would no longer yield to blackmail or threats. Later that same day, he came in person. I heard a pounding at the door and shouts, "Open up. You have no right to do this." I went to the door, holding my rifle, and said in a cold voice, take your hands off the door and leave, or I will call the police." A mixture of shock and fear flashed across my son's face. He stood there, unable to believe his eyes, completely disarmed by his father's calm but unwavering resolve. I watched as he retreated, and inside me flared a sense of complete moral victory. He would no longer use me as a source of money, no longer believe that arrogance and ingratitude entitled him to live at my expense. In that moment, I felt peace and inner freedom. My dignity was restored, the lesson had been delivered, and now nothing and no one could force me to be weak for those who did not value it. I returned to my armchair, poured myself another cup of tea, and thought with a quiet smile, let this be a lesson he remembers for the rest of his life. Several weeks had passed since that tense dinner. The house was once again filled with its familiar, calming silence. I sat in my armchair, holding an old photograph of my son when he was still small, and smiled quietly. Everything that had happened had left a deep mark, but it had given me a sense of inner justice. The lesson had been delivered, boundaries had been set, and I no longer felt like a tool for satisfying someone else's pride. My son no longer called every day with demands and threats. At first, I thought it was his defeat, but gradually I began to understand, perhaps he was reconsidering his actions. His silence wasn't indifference, it was reflection. I allowed myself to hope that one day he would truly appreciate what had been done for him. My daughter-in-law no longer imposed herself, my son's friends didn't interfere, and I once again felt in control of my life. I stopped worrying about others' ambitions and arrogance. Now my attention was my own, and that feeling of freedom was sweet. I set my cup down on the table, took a deep breath, and said quietly to myself, I will no longer be a wallet for ungrateful children. It's time to value myself. In that moment, I understood that true strength isn't about threats or money, it's the ability to maintain dignity and act decisively when you're being ignored. But I couldn't help smiling inwardly, we'll see what he's learned by the next holiday. Those words held a faint hint, of a chance, a lesson, the possibility of change. And though it wasn't all settled yet, one thing was clear, the boundaries were now set, respect had been restored, and the moral victory was mine. And somewhere deep down, I allowed myself a quiet hope, perhaps in the future, our relationship would change, and my son would finally understand that true gratitude begins with acknowledging the efforts of others.